Kia ora everyone and welcome to our October webinar. I'm excited and kind of sad because today is the last in our three-part series that we've been doing with the team at Digital New Zealand. So today we've got Thomasin back again and she's going to be talking to us about copyright for digital cultural heritage collections. I hope I remembered that correctly.
Yeah.
So I'll just hand it over to Thomasin to introduce herself and get started on the webinar.
Great. Kia ora, Julia. Kia ora koutou. It's really great to have everyone here today. Delivering a webinar is always a little bit weird because it's sort of like talking into this void, this sort of slightly silent void of digital people and all your different organizations all across the country. But I'm actually just gonna turn off my video while I talk through my slides and while I do some online searching, just because it's a little bit too much for my brain to undertake all these multiple visual information feeds. So I'm just going to switch myself off here, but hopefully everybody can still hear me loud and clear as I talk to my slides.
Yep,
cool. So thanks everybody for taking time out to join the webinar today. Hopefully there's some people eating like a yummy sandwich as well whilst they sit and listen to me talk about copyright. You can see in my first slide what we're going to cover today, and I also wanted to acknowledge that there are some really great copyright experts joining our webinar as well. Unfortunately, Victoria Leachman, who is the copyright specialist at Te Papa, is just going to be here for the first 15 minutes. But there are other members of the Lianza Standing Committee on Copyright joining us today, which is really great. And I will totally rely on you guys to help me out with copyright queries and questions because there's a lot to unpick and a lot to unpack. So it's great to have your support. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to talk a little bit about what Digital New Zealand is and kind of why we're interested in copyright and why we kind of decided to run this webinar in collaboration with Lianza. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of why this discussion is important, so unpack some kind of sort of bigger sector issues and what is the kind of problem that we're trying to solve with these kind of discussions. I'm going to give a brief overview of some copyright licenses that are available for heritage items, and then I'm going to look into some case studies of libraries across the country. So we're going to have a look at the heritage collection of Upper Hutt City Libraries, Auckland Libraries, and also Manawatu Heritage. And I would really like to acknowledge that there are members, staff who care for these collections and have done the digitizing and all the good work that's gone into making these available online, joining the webinar today as well. So if anybody has questions about these collections, I'm sure there are some people in the webinar who will be happy to help out at the end as well. So thanks those guys for coming along today. I'm also going to share towards the end Digital New Zealand's work on our new rights information prototype. So that was sort of part of the impetus for this session, is that we would really like to share this work with you and get any feedback that you have as librarians and information specialists and heritage specialists from across the country about this work. And then I'm going to go into some tools and resources for copyright conundrums, and then we can have some question time. So I'll sort of aim to speak for about 45 minutes so we can leave some good time at the end for discussion, but also not take up your entire lunch hour. I also wanted just to acknowledge that this session, we're kind of not going to go into the weeds of very specific copyright licenses for particular items. Instead, I'm going to kind of talk about some overarching issues, some ideas and some tools, and as I said, kind of present these case studies. The copyright for online collections is really tricky, but it has a huge impact on our culture and how our culture forms and understands itself. And this session is really going to focus on digitized heritage items from special collections in relation that are controlled and cared for by libraries. So hopefully that's all clear, our little a path where we're going to go today. And my PowerPoint has just decided it's unhappy. Let's try and click through. Here we go. So to dig into this kind of first question of what Digital New Zealand is and why we're kind of offering this webinar and why we're interested in copyright. So please, aroha mai for those who already know, but Digital New Zealand is a search engine and a data service that the National Library runs. And so on our website, of which this is the home page, you can search across, as it says here, 30 million New Zealand items from across 300 different collections in one place. So we are a search engine for digital content of all different media kinds, types that are either New Zealand related or created by New Zealanders. And you can search it on our website via a very easy keyword search. And the way we do this is we harvest the metadata of these collections. So we bring together the metadata, we structure it in this kind of augmented Dublin core schema, and we make that available to search via the site, from which people find material, and then they pop out of Digital New Zealand onto the page of one of our, what we call our content partners, but they're just our friends with collections across the country. So Digital New Zealand as a team, as a project, we have kind of been obviously in the provision of digital material, digital cultural heritage material online. We are very much kind of intertwined with the business of copyright. And we have had this tagline, which we sort of don't use as much anymore, but the team, since its inception, we're actually turning 10 years old this year. We've had this tagline, making New Zealand's digital content easy to find, share and use. And discussions of copyright really kind of sit around those verbs of share and use, how we make it clear to people what they can and can't do with material. And just a little bit of history, because it is our 10th birthday this year, we've sort of been thinking about this a bit. We have been in the business of sort of providing advice about copyright. So in the top here, you can see this tab, the Make It Digital Guides. So we have provided information, and we still do, about how to ascertain copyright for heritage items. And also in the past, we've sort of pushed the discussion and the around the reuse and reuse of heritage materials, and we've run things called remix competitions in the past, things called a competition called Mix and Mash, and one called gifitup, which is encouraging people to make gifts out of heritage items, which is currently run by Europeana, our counterpart in Europe, and we're sort of supporting that this year, but not taking a lead on it. So Digital New Zealand, from its very early days, kind of recognised that the online environment is quite different from the physical environment in many ways, and we need to think through kind of how we provide information online in alternate ways to the physical world. So sorry, I don't know why my slides are being so grumpy. So to this end, we have these filters on Digital New Zealand, which allow people to filter by usage. So every item of the 30 plus million items in Digital NZ has one of these tags applied to it, which is matched to the copyright information provided by our content partners. It'll be one or a combination of these statements, all rights reserved, unknown, modify, share, and use commercially. And so kind of an answer to looking at this question, kind of, as I mentioned at the beginning, kind of what is the problem that we are looking to solve with this kind of work and these discussions? So we, as kind of the heritage sector, we want to make our material accessible online, but we also want it to be cared for, and for it to be acknowledged for the work that we do with it, also to comply with donor agreements, and importantly, for this discussion, to comply with the 1994 Copyright Act. And I'm quoting here from a blog that was recently posted in relation to the National Library's reuse policy, which stated that the digital age has created a tension for libraries and archives. We want to meet the needs of many different kinds of users who have different takes on use and reuse from different perspectives. Sectors of the research community, anyone with information needs that can be met by a library, now have legitimate expectations that heritage materials will be available online and reusable. And at the same time, many content creators, donors, and their families and heirs, and communities have a legitimate ongoing need to protect their intellectual rights and privacy. So again, kind of returning to these verbs of share and use, the key question that seems to be for institutions looking at digitising their materials is what kind of sharing and what kind of using do we want people to be able to do with our online collections, and how do we want them to be empowered or not in order to do so. There's an important, I also wanted to set up quite an important distinction here between the terms access and use. So many of us will agree, it sort of goes, obviously kind of goes without saying now, this the internet provided a kind of huge opportunity for institutions like libraries and museums to make their content available online. And online access, the provision of material online, is actually quite different from use and reuse. So you know, you can access an image or you can access an object online and have a look at it. But on the other hand, use and reuse is, and I'm quoting here again from the National Library's blog, is the employment of an item for personal, social, educational, or commercial use. So to kind of split those two things apart, I think is quite important for this discussion, because there may be, obviously, the demand for online access is quite possibly different from the demand for online use and reuse. So over the years, Digital New Zealand has had a very strong focus on these terms, open access. But in our 10th year kind of birthday, I've been thinking a lot about this history, and I've always found that these are quite sort of problematic terms, as they mean quite different things in different sectors. So open access is applied by the open culture movement, who are supporters of unrestricted licensing on digitized cultural objects. The open source movement, who are advocates for making code freely available for adaptation and reuse. And the open data movement, who support similar efforts to release publicly funded data into the public domain. And the use of the terms open access means kind of something slightly different in each case, and I think is very media specific. And sometimes I do worry a little bit that Digital New Zealand's openness is a little bit misconstrued. I think what it actually means, looking back at Digital New Zealand's history, is that we really wanted to be clear, and via the search engine, one of the value adds that we can really offer to both users and our content partners is that we want to be very clear what it is people can and can't do with material, so they feel confident and empowered and kind of knowledgeable about that provision. And we also wanted to acknowledge that people really probably will want to do something with it, because that's what humans are like when they find information that's interesting to them. So you'll see each item on Digital New Zealand, just in connection to those usage filters that we make available, has, as you can see down here, a usage tag. And so this one here has all rights reserved for this image from Te Papa. And then this excellent cat riding a sheep from Archives New Zealand has share, modify, and use commercially. And just from memory, that usage statement maps to a Creative Commons license. I think they use CC by possibly just attribution. I have to double check. Oh, it's down the bottom there. Creative Commons 2.0. Yeah, CC by 2.0. So these kind of usage tags and some of our work was in response to, and continuing in response to, some trends that we see across the sector in relation to copyright. So in some cases, we'll find copyright information about heritage collections is buried down in some kind of out-of-the-way place on a website, or in some document that's on a terms and conditions page, and not connected to the content. So it's sort of tricky for people who are looking at material to know what they can and can't do with it, just because the information is difficult to ascertain. Some information is made available online with no rights information at all. So again, it's sort of tricky for people to ascertain what they can and can't do. And sometimes rights statements are a little bit contradictory and a bit opaque, so they're sort of a bit legalese. So it's sort of harder for people, for a kind of 10-year-old student looking for images for their school assignment, to kind of know what the rights statement might mean. We've also seen over the years the kind of re-licensing of some out-of-copyright material, material that is out of copyright being given an all rights reserved, or be relicensed with a Creative Commons license. And And also this idea that the digitization process is a creative act in itself and is creative enough to constitute another copyright on a digitized item. We also kind of see the distinction between the Western legal concept of copyright that doesn't always align with Māori concepts of kaitiakitanga, also the wairua of objects and images, and the significant need to reflect that in the discussion of our nation's taonga, and also acknowledge the colonial biases that are and collecting practices that many of our collecting institutions are based upon. So the rights bit that I'm going to talk to a bit later on kind of relates to some of these, and also the usage tags that we have currently are also a kind of a response to some of these trends, kind of trying to solve and discuss and raise some of these issues that we see across the sector from our sort of aggregator sort of standpoint. So let's have a look into a little bit of what the online environment is like for cultural heritage items. So this kind of goes back to this question of kind of what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and why is this discussion important? So I just kind of have pulled together in my presentation here a few examples of kind of collections out in the wild that I've seen recently. Whether or not these comply with copyright is questionable. So this is the Old Wellington Twitter handle, which shares a lot of images, and this is kind of, you know, expected, I guess, what would be expected behaviour, and in some instances behaviour that we would, I assume, kind of want to encourage as heritage institutions, is the wider sharing of our material. So this has quite a strong following and is often sharing information, obviously, as its tag says, in relation to Old Wellington. This is Colorizing New Zealand. So this is a Facebook page and a business, I believe. I don't know if he sells these images, but he is just really interested in colorizing old images, and this one is of the Wellington Railway Station in 1957. So this is taken from the Alexander Turnbull Library, which has been credited here, but whether or not this complies with copyright is, I'm not sure. Is someone trying to talk to me?
No, it was just Victoria saying that she had to leave.
Oh,
Thanks
okay.
for coming, Victoria.
Oh, sorry. I see someone said here we can't hear you.
I'm gonna send them the recording later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Can everyone else can hear me though?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yes, Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Cool. So Colorizing New Zealand. Yeah. So they do lots of colorizing of images. And this is on their Facebook page. You can see here it was very highly liked and shared, and it is a really beautiful image. Yeah, so this is just like some of the behaviors that people kind of do with online collections, and what was possibly not totally different from what people maybe had done with physical objects, like you could colorize an old photograph, for example. But I guess the ability to share that in this way is new, with obviously digital technologies that are available to us now. I don't know why my PowerPoint is clagging up a little bit. Just refresh. There we go. This is sort of slightly disconnected, but kind of related. So this is on Digital New Zealand. We just have this Facebook plugin, so people can comment via Facebook on the site. And people do, with regularity, they often correct and share information, discuss metadata, whether they think it's accurate, particularly of places. And as you can see here in relation to this image, again from Te Papa, this person says this is likely to be Henry Williams Hawkins and his second wife Annie, Harriet Tasker, who married at St. Mark's in Wellington, And I thought this was interesting. The date of circa 1920 shown above is unlikely given the bride's style of dress in here, which is more pre-World War I than post-World War I. Henry and Annie had a son, but he died, unfortunately. And Henry died as a result of diabetes. So you can see here, this person is just kind of, again, these aren't kind of new ideas. This is like the Web 2.0 discussion that we've been having for a long time as a sector about people's ability to, and enthusiasm for correcting, interacting, engaging with material online in different ways. This was just an example of one of the GIFs that just popped up the other day, because gifitup, the GIF competition, is running currently. It's coordinated by Europeana, and this was just a nice one that appeared recently. This is a poster from the State Archives, not quite sure which one, it's not a very good attribution of me, in the States, and yeah, it was just kind of a clever use of this poster. So again, people might be interested in animating or reanimating material like GIFs. And this is, I just wanted to show you guys this. So I'm just going to go off-piste onto the internet. Hopefully everybody can see where I am, what I'm doing. This was a Twitter thread that came up recently. So again, just an illustration of some online behaviors that we may or may not want to encourage with the copyright in relation to our online collections. So this guy, I think, is a journalist, and he, for Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, he posted this thread about discovering his whakapapa and some of his family's place in New Zealand as immigrants in the 19th century. So he did a search on papers past and found that his great-great-uncle Patrick Callboy was a member of the Waikato militia. And he goes on to kind of tell this kind of long story about, and you can see here he's taken a screen grab and uploaded from papers past the discussion which talks about his, so was it his great-great-grandfather's role in the land wars, and the land that was given to them, the stolen land that was given to them after the wars, and his kind of really emotional response to discovering this part of his family's history. So you can see here he's uploaded some information from Auckland libraries. He's got here this Google map, and then he also had another image which he hasn't actually attributed. I'm not quite sure whose collection that is from. Kind of goes on. It was very long. Yeah, and so you can just kind of see here, this is a sort of example again of a kind of online behavior in relation to digitized cultural heritage material. So people want to kind of share and discuss. They want to have this kind of emotional response, and they want to tell other people about it. And I thought this was just like a really beautiful example of that. And then the discussion that ensued with other people. So you can see here he's uploaded some paintings, a screen grab from somewhere, some catalogue records from Auckland libraries, an image, and some stuff from papers past. So again, I'm not commenting on the copyright appropriateness of this, but I'm instead saying this is kind of what people are doing. This is what people want to do, and I think we need to think through kind of what sort of behaviours we want to permit and encourage, and why in relation to this kind of stuff that's happening online. I also just wanted to reference quickly, I'm going to talk about this at the end, but Andrea Wallace gave a really great NDF presentation last year, which I wasn't at, but I watched online, and I will show you just a quick slide from it at the end. Andrea talked about how the public is largely unaware, basically, of copyright issues in the way, obviously, that we are in the sector. And there's an interesting discussion about what our role is in educating people about it, or educating them about kind of the digital literacies of attribution and search. And I also wanted to mention this kind of te papa anecdote that Victoria and various people have said to me, is that when te papa did a big release a number of years ago of putting no known copyright restrictions and Creative Commons licenses on their material, and Victoria mentioned they did a big press release and that kind of thing, but a lot of people kind of came back saying, but I don't understand, like, your content was already online, I don't get what the difference is here. So it's just kind of interesting that disjunction between kind of how we think, how important copyright is obviously for our institutions, and then what kind of activities are happening online regardless. And I guess the question is for us is in these institutions is how we want to engage with that activity. Do we want to, these are just kind of open questions, do we want to police it more? Do we want to encourage it more? Do we want to enable it more? Yeah, where do we sit in relation to that? That kind of discrepancy between how we think through copyright and how people just on Twitter sharing stuff think about it. So this is a pretty exciting slide. So I just wanted to talk, and Sarah, anybody else, please feel free to jump in here. I just wanted to talk a little bit about some kind of basic copyright discussion, and then some copyright licenses that are available for heritage materials, and then dig into those case studies. So I'm going to kind of presume a bit of knowledge about copyright, but also presume a bit of knowledge about Creative Commons. So please forgive me. Maybe at the end I'm going to share some tools and resources, but also maybe at the end, if you do want to know more information about these things, that you might have some specific questions to ask. But at its very basic level, copyright is the right to control the copying of one's work. I'm quoting here from Digital New Zealand's Make It Digital guides. And copyright is an internationally recognised legal protection under the New Zealand Copyright Act 1994, which we have here. And it gives someone, usually the creator or publisher, an exclusive right for a set period of time to copy, distribute, show, perform, communicate, or adapt an original work. The copyright holder also has the exclusive right to license the work to someone else. That is, to give the permission for them to copy and reuse the work too. So copyright is unregistered. That's pretty important. That is, the law grants copyright automatically upon the creation of a work, and you don't have to apply for it. And no one keeps a record of who owns the copyright to which work, crucially. Protected works do not need a copyright symbol or statement to gain protection. The fact that copyright ownership is often poorly documented can lead to some tricky logistical problems. And I'm probably speaking to the converted here. Many of you here will know those logistical problems when you're trying to track down someone who might own the copyright to a particular work. And so obviously different media, so all the different media in heritage collections will have different copyright terms. So actually I have a question here, and Sarah or someone might be able to jump in. Licenses, there's a difference between license and right statements, which I'll dig into a little bit later. These are some the licenses available for in copyright, and then obviously no known copyright material for heritage collections. So we obviously just have all rights reserved, something that's in copyright, but also Creative Commons licenses. So again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about these, but they're basically a suite of legally robust licenses that are available for in copyright material if you would like to give people the permission to reuse it and use it in different ways. For example, if you want to say use the license Creative Commons Attribution, you're saying you can use this item any way you like as long as you attribute me as the creator. And there are other various modular ways to combine the licenses to allow for various kinds of use and reuse. And no known copyright is encouraged. No known copyright restrictions, I believe, is the exact terminology, which is encouraged by the New Zealand government. Open access and licensing framework for government institutions with heritage collections. And I believe that's the statement that's been used by Te Papa on a lot of their collections items with their big reuse, with their big release, sorry. A right statement is slightly different, and we're going to talk about right statements a little bit at the end, but a right statement is a statement of fact that tells you what the copyright or other reuse rights situation is with an item or collection that might affect what you want to do with it. It in itself is not advice and it's not a license, but it can be used as a basis for advice. And importantly, if you use a consistent schema, you can program friendly, accessible, locally relevant advice to run with each statement. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end. So right statements just says precisely this is what it is. So I'm going to dig into a few case studies here, and I really would encourage at the end there are some people from these institutions joining the webinar who've kindly taken their time to join us and can answer any questions about these collections and this work that great work they've undertaken to make them available online. And they will be the best place to answer. So I wanted to talk a bit about Upper Hutt City Library's collection. So one part of the library's archival collection is this really amazing collection of photographs by Revel Jackson, who was a photographer in Upper Hutt in kind of the 50s and 60s. And this was taken in 1970, it says. So he donated a really incredible collection of the social activity and life of Upper Hutt over this period to Upper Hutt City Libraries. And they did this awesome digitization project to make it available via a Recollect site. And in conjunction with the discussion with Revel, they gave it Creative Commons, Attribution, non-commercial, sorry, claggy old PowerPoint. Yeah, here we go. Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial 3.0 New Zealand license for this collection. So people can use this material for non-commercial purposes. They can post it on their blogs. They can do whatever they want with it if they attribute it and it's non-commercial. I'm just going to quote here a little bit from a blog post that Reed Perkins, who works at the Upper Hutt City Library, did with Creative Commons, now known as Toha Toha, a number of years ago. Sorry, I'm just standing up because the lights in my room have just gone off on me. Now I'm back. So Reed said, until recently, most of these archival items were largely unknown. Members of the public would have to request copies of heritage materials and would be charged an administrative fee by the Upper Hutt City Libraries. So as Upper Hutt City archivist Reed Perkins points out, this took up valuable staff time and tended to put people off using the images. Recollect allows users to download images from Upper Hutt City Libraries' rich archive of local heritage items. And as Reed points out, this has been a really popular feature. People like the fact they have easy access to these images, which of course we were using, if we were using a traditional all rights reserved copyright model, they wouldn't be able to. Reed points to this collection by Revel Jackson, so including AMP shows, birthday parties and weddings. It's over 8,000 photographs that have been made available for distribution and reuse via Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial. So for smaller regional institutions, open access and open licensing are a good way to encourage the local community to share and reuse heritage items. And then Reed says, our issue is getting people to use the stuff. Our issue is access, getting people to use our collections. As soon as we were fairly sure there weren't any copyright claims, we want to put the items out in circulation. And the Creative Commons licenses also allowed us, we worked with Reed and when we were approached by this, I don't know if you guys ever encountered this thing, the Retronaut, which is kind of like interesting heritage items that are kind of shared quite widely and often I think it has a Facebook page and that kind of thing, and a Twitter. It's very popular. So when we were approached by them to put some content together for Mashable, they had a like a collaboration with Mashable to bring together some material. And because these items had Creative Commons licenses, we were really happy to make them available for this Mashable collection. These images of boogieing teenagers in the 1960s, and I've forgotten. Sorry, I haven't written it down how many times this was shared and retweeted and all that kind of thing, but it was huge, thousands and upon thousands of shares and people looking at the material, which was really cool. Cool, so that's Upper Hutt City Libraries. And if you want to also find out more information about it, I strongly encourage you checking out. So Reed has a NDF presentation on YouTube called Digital Communities. He's got a few actually, Reed, and they're all really worth watching. This one goes into some more details about Upper Hutt's work. And so I just wanted to move on to now the Manawatu Heritage site. So Evan, I believe, is here from Manawatu Heritage, the archivist here, which is really awesome. So the heritage, is that? Yes, he is. Hi, Evan. And so the Heritage team look after the Ian Matheson City Archives. Please correct me if I'm wrong at any stage here, Evan. The repository for the Palmerston North City Council and Community Archives. It holds a wealth of material relating to the development of Palmerston North and its citizens and their lives from its earliest days in the 1870s to the present day. So in 2007, the Ian Matheson City Archives began an internal digitisation program displayed through Pātaka Ipurangi, their previous digital repository. And in 2016, they launched Manawatu Heritage, aimed at gathering records digitally from their community as well as better showcasing their own holdings. Digitisation is ongoing and new material is continually added to the online collection. So this is a quick snapshot of how things look on Manawatu Heritage's site. Here's the Lido Swimming Centre. Sorry, this didn't all fit very well onto one slide. And here is the metadata underneath. So you can see here that this image is, again, a Creative Commons Attribution Alone license. But Palmerston North Libraries, they do have like quite a vast array of different, not a vast array, but a number of different license types on all the objects. So this image here of Helen Clark visiting Palmerston North Pensioner Housing Complex has a Contact Us for Details license. So the detail of which is drilled into in this really great and very clear explanation on their of copyright in Māori and English on their site. So you can see here they've said many of our collections are in copyright or have an unknown copyright status. It doesn't mean that you cannot use them. It just means that you may need to get permission before reusing the content. If the license is any one of the following, please contact us. Copyright, contact us for details. Some restrictions may apply. Then they also have the no known copyright restrictions, and then also Creative Commons licenses. So a real array of different licenses applied to different material. And so finally in my case study, I'm just aware of time ticking away. I wanted to talk about Auckland Libraries. So the Heritage Images part of Auckland Libraries has a really rich collection of maps and photographs, a lot of digitized newspapers, a lot of really interesting material available online there. And they employ the no known copyright statement with their material, but they also have a very clear attribution area which you can copy and paste, which is really great. So for this item here, a map of the Puhi Puhi silver field, it has a no known copyright license, and then a really clear please acknowledge Sir George Grey special collections, and just a line that you can easily copy and paste to make sure your attribution is correct. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those two things and a little bit about attribution and citation and their importance as well. But yeah, those are just three examples of three really great libraries who are doing awesome things with their digital collections, making things really clear for people as to what they can and can't do. And yeah, also in relation to the citation material, that's really important as well. So thank you, Auckland Libraries and Upper Hutt City Libraries and Palmerston North for letting me profile your collections here in relation to this discussion. That's really great. So, oh, sorry, and this is just the copyright page on Auckland Library's site. And also important to note here that they have this section here, Ngā whakahua Māori, use of Māori images. So they say Auckland Libraries acknowledges the rights of iwi, hapu and whānau descendants to request the removal of images provided in this medium. The intent is not to offend or be culturally insensitive, but to provide an awareness of image and location. So you can see here they've got a very clear way to contact them for identification or discussion of removal of images, which is also really important, to make sure that conduit between people and institution is really clear if people find material that they believe is inappropriate to be online or hasn't been considered in the appropriate way, that it's easy for them to get in contact. Library. So I just wanted to finish, where are we at? So just sort of talk for 10 more minutes, basically. You guys are probably getting sick of my disembodied voice emanating through your computer, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about Digital New Zealand's rights statements work, just to kind of share it with you and get any thoughts that you might have. It might percolate away for a while and you might choose to get in contact with us later, which would be great. And then I just wanted to point you to a bunch of really useful resources if you're thinking about digitizing your collections or looking at copyright in relation to them. So Digital New Zealand, as I mentioned, has all these usage tabs, usage filters that people can filter via the content via on the site. And actually we've been undertaking some work basically for this whole year and before, and we're slowly getting there on it, to actually refine these statements. So these are the statements that we came up with 10 years ago. So again, it's our 10th birthday this year. And we actually just thought that they were a little, they needed updating. They're quite ambiguous now. So for example, the term share is quite ambiguous, particularly like, does this mean I can just share the URL of an item, or does it mean I can fully download it and upload it to my Instagram feed? Both of those are kind of shares in a way, so that verb is kind of a bit ambiguous, so we wanted to unpack it a little bit more. And also to provide clear information, a more granular level of information about copyright as well. And also one thinking or kind of philosophy that was really important to this work was to really highlight what can be done with information and content as opposed to kind of what can't be done. So sort of to invert that, that behavior and in light of that, this is kind of where we've sort of got to. So this is an item, the rights information for an item that's in copyright, it's all rights reserved. So you can see here, what is the copyright status of this item, all rights reserved, you can get more information. Then what can I do with it? So we wanted to have this kind of question that people are likely to ask themselves. We always have to have the caveat of checking with one of our awesome content partners as to the specifics terms of use, but this is our understanding. So then we break it down so that in terms of the fair dealing exceptions in the Copyright Act, people can use this information, even if it is all rights reserved, for research, private study, criticism, review, or news reporting. So there are some behaviours that are legally permitted, but then underneath that, there's no sharing, no modification, no commercial use. So these are kind of, as you can see, kind of more sort of clearly mapped to the Creative Commons kind of modular approach of behaviours. And we wanted to have some good verbs in there, sharing, modifying. So that's an all rights reserved item. And then I wanted to show you as well, so this is a Creative Commons attribution. So attribution is only required to reuse this item. So you can see here we have the copyright status is a Creative Commons license. What can I do with it? There are all those permitted behaviours within the fair dealing exceptions, but then you can also share it, modify it, and use it commercially. So we wanted to kind of make it very clear. Sometimes if people see something that says CC BY, if you're not au fait with copyright or confident in Creative Commons, that little combination of letters may be quite opaque. So we wanted to unpack that a bit and make it very clear what that means. So all of this information will just be pulled from the metadata of our content partners. So we're using that to kind of populate these fields and express it in different ways via the Digital New Zealand site. And finally, so this is an unknown item. So we haven't been able to determine the rights status of this item. So as clear as we possibly can be, again, we think, within fair dealing, you could use it for these permitted behaviours, but you do need to check before sharing or modifying, because it is unclear and it hasn't been ascertained by the institution. So yeah, I'm keen to get people's feedback about this kind of red, green, yellow light sort of situation, whether it's clear, whether it's unclear, whether in fact it does fulfill our goal of being a bit more permissive and a bit more transparent. I just very quickly, you'll see down the bottom, sorry, these slides have cut it off. It's probably best on this one actually. You can see the cite this item section. We also want to, so I've cut a section of it off, but we wanted to also make a citation field so people can just very easily copy and paste, kind of like on the Auckland Library's site, with what they can and can't do with, and to attribute for the content. So instead of having to possibly pull information from different parts of a website, they just have it all in one field. And they can just copy and paste. We haven't really worked a huge amount on the citation area yet, and it needs some refinement. So if anybody has any ideas or is an expert in citation, we would love to hear from you. We're trying to think of having some different ways to cite, some different conventions. So we've got MLA down there, a Wikipedia one, a few others, so possibly being able to provide a few different options. So, is everyone still with me? Possibly. Maybe you've gone and had lunch. Let's move on. I'm just going to talk for about 5 more minutes. So I just wanted to point you to some tools that you may or may not already know about or be interested in. So here we go. On the DigitalNZ site, we have Make It Digital, which is our suite of guides and advice for, as it says here, getting started with digitization all the way through to enabling use and reuse, which talks a lot about copyright. So there's a lot of information there. Encourage you to get amongst it depending on, wherever you may be in the life cycle of digital content. Sorry, my slides have just clagged up again. I'll wait for them to unclag. There are some great things on the Make It Digital guide. So for example, there is the public domain guide, which basically says what's in the public domain as of the 1st of January each year. So in this case, the 1st of January 2018. And there's also a really great photography flowchart. So if you have photography that you're looking at digitizing and making available, it's a flowchart through which you can follow to sort of go yes, no to ascertain the copyright status of the material. Okay, I'm sorry, my slides seem to have clagged up, so I'm just going to plow forward talking to you guys without any imagery. I also wanted to really point you towards Sarah Powell's copyright chatbot, which is really awesome. So Sarah works at AUT, and this is a really good tool. You can basically access it via, I think it's called Glams Aotearoa or something on Facebook, and you can ask the chatbot questions. So you can say the date, what you have, the date. It'll ask you to give it more information as it needs, and it will slowly direct you to what the copyright status of an item is. It's really useful and a very easy, user-friendly way to get information. Also, the Lianza website has heaps of great information. It's got a good section on copyright and Creative Commons for libraries. Here's someone chatting. Copyright for Glams on Facebook, and select Get Started, Sarah says, and search direct, and Facebook Messenger for it to pop up. Thanks, Sarah. Oh, here we go. We might have Joy. So here we go. Copyright terms in public domain. Sorry, these are on Make It Digital. It's not happy though. And Victoria Leachman, who was here earlier, recently released a whole lot of spreadsheet guides for how she ascertains copyright at Te Papa. They are very detailed, but also really interesting and really useful if you're interested in getting into the details of this. Basically shows her workflow of ascertaining copyright status for items across their myriad of collections. I also wanted to finally point you in the direction. So the National Library are undertaking some work at the moment. A couple of years ago, the Digital Public Library of America and Europeana, who are Digital New Zealand's kind of equivalents overseas, did a project called writestatements.org, and this was an idea to provide a collaborative approach to right statements that can be used to communicate the copyright status of cultural objects. The collaboration establishes the vocabulary in every organization can use to talk to their audiences about copyright and related rights in a meaningful way. The intent of writestatements.org is to encourage adoption by other organizations across the globe. And in relation to this, the National Library investigated these right statements and is looking at adopting them for the National Library's collections, but also potentially across institutions across New Zealand. The idea is to adopt these right statements, but also to add a few New Zealand specific statements, one of which would be no copyright, cultural and ethical considerations, and items that may fit the status would be Māori material with kaitiaki connections, where the body decides appropriate use, possibly images of death or trauma, other circumstances where commercial unrestricted use may not be automatically approved, and circumstances where we have signed an MOU with an iwi or a Māori trust relating to an item or collection. So there are some New Zealand specific statements that have been put together, and I'm sorry that I have completely lost the power to control my PowerPoint presentation. I don't know what is happening. But if you Google, it's a little bit buried on the National Library's website, but if you go to services for librarians, there's kind of like a policy section on that site, and there's a whole post about this right statements work, the kind of how we see our collection items relating to the different statements and the new statements that we're suggesting. So encourage you to go and have a look at that and get in contact with the library if you're interested in this work as well. So I'm going to stop there because it's 12:50, and I'm going to try and see if I can get out of my clagged up computer. But I can see the chat. I can see the chat box. So maybe Julia, if you want to take control of questions, or people can post questions into the chat discussion. I've covered quite a lot, I'm aware, and people's sugar levels might be lagging. But I'm happy to answer questions, and also aware that we have some great, here we go, Amy Joseph. Yeah, thanks Amy. Sorry, my computer's completely died. So Amy has just posted the link there. to the right statements work that's been circulated. Awesome. And yeah, there are some really great copyright experts in our group. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them, or other people can attempt to answer them too in our little collaboration. Okay, I'm going to shut up now. I'm shutting up. Everybody's gone into a copyright coma.
Too much to think about.
I wish I could have showed you Sarah's copyright bot. That's really awesome, but I'm afraid my computer has given up the ghost, but luckily Zoom kept working.
Yes.
So I could keep blathering on. Yeah, the right statements work is really interesting for anybody interested in getting involved at Digital Public Library of America stuff in Europeana. Yeah, it's interesting to see that the library sort of discovered that they were appropriate for our collections here in some ways. There's a question here from, here's Evan. Yeah, Victoria Leachman's copyright chat is really useful and in-depth. It really is, it's awesome. Put a lot of hard work into it. I should, if I could get out, maybe somebody else might be able to post a link to, Victoria shared it on Twitter recently, and it's just in a Google Doc, so someone might be able to track down that link, someone whose computer is working.
I would do it, but I don't want to mix up the recording that's happening on my computer.
Yeah, that's cool.
Did you see the question from Tracy?
Oh, no, where are we? Sarah's finding Victoria's. So Tracy's asked, when you're using overseas content partners, how do you translate this to New Zealand copyright laws? Yeah, that's a really good question. So currently, in relation, in terms of Digital New Zealand's content partners, we work, for example, with Europeana, we have this from their materials, and Trove, and the V&A. So that would be a kind of a conversation with the content partner where we would have a look at the metadata and see if it's applicable, obviously, to our first, out to the usage statements that we make available on Digital New Zealand, where it kind of sits. And I guess if there was some query, like if it kind of fell between, that 70-year, 50-year realm of New Zealand's difference to other people, would probably default to an all rights reserved statement on Digital New Zealand. But yeah, it would be in conversation with each specific content partner. And yeah, I don't know, I can find out more detail about that, but that would be my assumption at this stage. I hope that's helpful, Tracy. It's probably not that helpful.
Amy replied and said if it's in copyright, it's the jurisdiction where you would be doing the copying. So using it here in New Zealand, New Zealand law applies.
Oh, cool. Thanks, Amy.
And did you see the question from Kim?
So Kim asks, we have old photos donated which people say that are theirs and sign over copyright only later, and find the odd one on Digital New Zealand. So should we credit what we find on Digital New Zealand in terms of copyright? I don't quite understand that question. So we have old photos donated which people say they're theirs and sign over copyright only later, and we find the odd one on Digital New Zealand. So should we credit it to where we find on Digital New Zealand? So is the distinction that their copyright isn't reflected on the content on Digital New Zealand? Possibly, in which case it would be a conversation with the content partner, because we would be pulling that information through with them. So if the question is they want their copyright to be, first of all, whether they want the thing to be online, considering they're the copyright holder, and secondly, if they're happy with it to be online but they want to be attributed, then it would be a discussion with the content partner in order that metadata be added, and then it would be fed through to Digital New Zealand. Does that answer the question, Kim? Feel free to let me know if not. Okay, cool. So Amy answered the question awesomely. Victoria's chat, thank you, Mandy. Cool, thanks everyone. Good collaboration. My dead computer.
We also, with the recording, I'll put the links that were in the chat and in the description box of the YouTube video so that you can find them easily. Because there are a few people that had issues with sound and couldn't attend, so
Okay.
But they want the links.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I haven't finished with this, but maybe the sort of, not the elephant in the room, but the elephant in the future is obviously that New Zealand, we're in the midst of some copyright reform. So the reform, the act is being looked at by MP currently, so that there will be changes that have implications for us in the heritage sector. But that doesn't, I don't think that doesn't preclude us from still obviously talking about it now and figuring out, you know, using the great work that people are doing in the sector as models and talking through some of the issues and getting together and chatting about it, which we have been doing for many years, but there are always new problems to solve and questions to ask. And yeah, I guess in relation to Digital New Zealand's work, would really love your feedback on those rights statements, because they will be reflecting the good work that so many of all our content partners do, and we want to make sure that they are fit for purpose, basically, and that you guys think that they are appropriate and accurate. Here's Sarah, who knows everything about copyright. She says, if you're putting a copy of a work online, then I would apply the copyright duration of where the original work was created. Cool, thanks, Sarah. So if it's a UK work, then 70 years from the death of the author applies. Yeah, and then so that should also be reflected on Digital New Zealand's usage statements as well. And hopefully it would be from the metadata we're pulling through. I'd be interested to hear if anybody else has any kind of other interesting case studies or use cases or anything that they've been looking at internationally or locally. I did finish with a slide of Andrea Wallace's presentation, which I encourage you to all go and have a look at. So Andrea talks a lot about the problem of the Mona Lisa's digital surrogate being relicensed. The kind of the activity of digitizing an item is deemed to be enough creative activity to give it a new license. And we do see a fair amount of content on Digital New Zealand that is in the public domain but has been relicensed with a Creative Commons license often. And yeah, I think that's an interesting discussion to be had, and Andrea's presentation is a really great one to kind of unpack some of the wider issues and some of the philosophical issues as well around the provision of the relicensing of public domain material, of the digital surrogates of public domain material. It all gets very meta in her presentation, but it's really great. So I highly recommend it as a watch. Julia, I think you should invite your cat back to this conversation, because Philippa's just asking that question. I don't know, someone else, I believe, Victoria and other people have been involved with MB in some of the discussions in the sector about the reform. Maybe Mandy might know as well. She might have been involved with the people at MB. They might be looking specifically at digital surrogates and that problem. Someone else might be able to answer.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I would expect that it's possible that that will be addressed. At the moment, we're waiting for an issues paper that's already been quite delayed. It'll either drop in Q4, so sometime between now and the end of the year, or very early next year. And at that point, I think we'll be in a better position to answer your question, Philippa, about digital surrogates, as well as the sort of myriad questions that we have around it. The copyright review process isn't going to be fast, so if there are things that are important to you, once that paper comes out, there will be a submission period, so you can respond to what's in the issues paper and let them know. So if digital surrogates is something that's important to you, I would follow that process and make sure that you make a submission to that effect once the paper comes out.
Awesome, thanks so much, Mandy. We have another question here from Leslie. So we have a photograph of a portrait of a locally significant soldier painted later in life. probably an island, don't know by who, unusable. So Leslie, you're kind of articulating the issue of the orphan work. So yeah, Sarah's just said the same thing, smiley face. So Sarah, actually you might be able to be better placed to answer this question for Leslie in terms of due diligence of seeking out the creator, not to put you on the spot.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yep. So in terms of orphan work, in my previous role at Auckland Museum as rights specialist, we would do something that we call due diligence. So if you can search as much as you can on the photograph, so it's a photograph of a portrait, which makes it even more trickier. So if you think that the portrait itself is out of copyright, that's fine, but then the photograph taken of the portrait will also have a copyright layer on top of it as well. So there's two kind of separate things going on. And because it's a photograph, and if it's just a physical photograph that you have, not a digital copy, then maybe there's no metadata or anything related to that. So it just becomes an orphan work where you actually have no information at all. You can put that online, and you can use one of the rights statements that Thomasin was talking about, and that's what Auckland Museum did. And basically we just would say that we didn't know the copyright owner, and it was undetermined who it was, and we had a copyright takedown notice on our website. So if someone came forward and said, no, I'm the copyright owner of this, we would take it down. But in terms of a portrait of a locally significant soldier, I would say it's very low risk. And I think as a public institution or heritage institution, it's in like the public's favour to kind of release that work. I'm a little bit of a put it online, and if someone comes forward, then you kind of can figure out the rights after, as long as you've got a clear statement online to say that you'll take it down if someone comes forward.
Yeah, and making sure that your contact details are really easily accessible, and you're quite transparent about it.
Yeah, exactly. You might just get more information, and that's the kind of catch-22. If you don't put it out there, no one knows it's there, no one will come forward. So yeah, we just decided it was low risk. The museum was happy for us to put things online where we weren't quite sure of the copyright owner. So I would just say go for it.
Cool, thanks Sarah. Hopefully that helps Leslie. We're lucky to have Sarah here. Looks like we might be wrapping up. Everyone's going to go forth into their
Rest of the
copyright conundrums.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did actually have a slide with my contact details at the end, but if everybody is interested in being in contact regarding any of the issues raised, in particular the library's rights statements work or Digital New Zealand's rights statement changes, all of the details are on the Digital New Zealand website to get in touch with us. So really encourage you to do so. And thanks, Evan. That's great. Thanks so much for being here. It was great to have people from Palmerston North and Upper Hutt, and I don't know if anyone was here from Auckland Libraries, but thanks so much for your awesome work. That's really cool.
And Amy also just mentioned that orphan works were the biggest issue identified in the survey the Leanza Copyright Committee did last year. So it will likely be a major focus in their submission on the review. So that's cool.
Great. Cool, that's awesome.
Lots of nice feedback coming through too.
Yeah, nice. Oh, I think I should also just very briefly mention here, so we ran 3 webinars, as Julia said, with Leanza this year, and it's been really great working with you, Julia. So thanks to Leanza, thanks to Julia, and thanks to the Leanza Copyright Committee for your help and advice as well. It was really nice collaboration, and I'm really pleased we were able to offer these sessions for everyone. So kia ora. That's great.
You too. Thanks, Thomasin. Cool.
Cool. I'm going to try and turn my computer off, which I suspect might be quite difficult.